One group expected to play an important role in the midterm elections, particularly in close races, are Asian American Pacific Islander voters. Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial and ethnic group in the country, and you see more and more of them elected to prominent positions, including, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, Senators Mazie Hirono and Tammy Duckworth, Congressman Ted Lieu, and the newly elected Mayor of Boston, Massachusetts, Michelle Wu. In 2020, turnout among AAPI voters grew more than any other group, including in the battleground state of Georgia. Asian American voters went for President Joe Biden by almost 2-1. But advocates say Democrats can't take the AAPI vote for granted. And now a new super PAC called Justice Unites Us aims to engage these voters this particular midterm year. And it's chaired by Cincinnati Mayor Aftab Purval and Lindy Liu. Lindy Liu joins us now. She served as the Asian American outreach team for the Biden campaign and is an officer on the DNC's Ethnic Council. So, Lindy, thank you so much for joining us. How important do you think it is for folks to focus on AAPI voters and turning them out in this midterm election?
Thank you so much for having me today. We're incredibly excited to launch Justice Unites Us. As you mentioned, Asian Americans are the fastest growing demographic in the country. So it's absolutely vital that we invest in this community, which can be the game changer in battleground states like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Nevada. And so it's so crucial that we do everything we can. We put everything on the field for 2022. So much is at stake. And I feel like much of our country doesn't understand how grave the situation is. And especially in, for example, we're investing in Montgomery and Philadelphia counties where they're in Pennsylvania, where there's a sizable Asian American community. And we can really be the margin that pushes important candidates like Josh Shapiro, who's running for governor, over the top.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned the margins, because every time, well, traditionally, when people would mention the margins, they talk about white suburban voters. And they're like, well, we have to moderate our message on race because we have to make up those margins and those suburban voters that, we really want to get. But I think what you just said about margins and targeting AAPI voters specifically in order to make up some of that margin is an important point. What about the issues? How do you talk to those communities? What are the most important issues for AAPI voters in this upcoming midterm?
I think one of the most important things to understand is that the Asian American community isn't monolithic. We're comprised of many different ethnicities and cultures, so it's not uniform. We have many different issues that we care about. And that's why we need to invest in organizers and canvassers who uniquely understand the multifaceted nature of this demographic. We have South Asians, Southeast Asians, East Asians, Pacific Islanders. So this is a huge umbrella. And some of them lean conservative. And I actually ran for Congress when I was 25. I helped President Biden with this Asian American effort. And we have a record of trying to turn those Asian Americans that lean conservative into the Democratic camp and to show that we're better on the economy, we're better for businesses, education. We invest in your kids. We won't vote against baby formula, So there are so many issues, bread and butter issues that resonate with Asian Americans. And it's not just one block. It's not monolithic. And so we're also investing in targeted media, language media, speak in their language, and trying to be as inclusive as possible. And also collaborating with Asian American businesses, which are the hubs of civic engagement in their neighborhoods. And we need to be there every season of year. Every year, not just even numbered years, not just in September after Labor Day where we scramble for Election Day. This has to be a consistent and long-term investment. And I think part of the reason why we haven't invested in the AAPI community before is that the population was kind of scattered. But now that our economic and financial cloud is growing, we are also growing in population size. And it would be an oversight not to invest in the AAPI community now. We should have been doing this years ago.
I've been beating this drum for a while. I read a whole book. I'm like, there's all these voters that are their demographics. They seem to be growing very quickly. Maybe you should try talking to them in their language. And you mentioned one of the barriers to engagement is language. Can you talk specifically as a former campaign person for the Biden folks about how important it is for campaigns, political staff, to include people who speak and can translate into the variety of languages necessary to communicate with such a diverse voting bloc.
Absolutely. And to answer that question, we have to be where they are. They're not necessarily on Instagram or TikTok or even Twitter. I know we love Twitter, but not everyone does. They have, for example, East Asians flock to WeChat. Have you heard of that app? But, there's a huge, vast, majority of Chinese Americans and Taiwanese Americans who use the app WeChat. And so that's where we need to be. And that's what you used for the Biden campaign. We were able to spread the word, fundraise. For my own campaign, I was able to raise close to $1 million through WeChat. And we had groups around the country, and we can turn that infrastructure into a way to generate votes. And it's I think a lot of us, I'm actually an immigrant, and actually that makes me incredibly grateful to be American because I never take a single thing for granted. But the reason why I bring that up is I think part of our culture teaches us to be just rule followers and to keep quiet. And I break that all the time because I'm so vocal. But, a lot of people it's part of our heritage just to go along to get along, and not to really participate in the political system. And I think that's something everyone needs to unlearn, because literally our democracy is at stake. It's not a hyperbole. It's no longer two political parties. We have a political party, and then from my point of view, a fascist organization. So too much is on the line for people to just sit on the sidelines, and we need to educate voters about what is at stake. And I think if we do, there's a huge chance that Asian Americans will be swayed. And they were. They went overwhelmingly for President Biden. And we need to do that again. And also to inform voters, it's not just about every 4 years. It's about midterms as well. Because if you have the White House and you don't have the House and the Senate, there's really not much you can do, especially with Manchin Sinema, as we've seen. So it's going to be extremely important that we do everything we can to lay the groundwork now.
You mentioned the fact that there's so much at stake in this particular election. I mean, the health of democracy, I think, is top of mind for anybody working in the media, anybody who is a voter, any person who has firing neurons. But exactly. Also one of the other issues that's come up in this particular pandemic, and even predating the pandemic, was AAPI hate crimes and the uptick in violence committed towards these communities because of the rhetoric, frankly, coming out of the White House and conservative media. Can you talk about how that is a factor in this particular midterm elections, and how that's top of mind for folks every single day when they go outside? Maybe it's not in the headlines every single day, but it's definitely top of mind for members of this community as they move throughout the world.
Celia, I just want to thank you for even bringing it up, because it's been a harrowing 2-3 years. To be honest, I wake up every day and I see these hate-filled messages that I get on Twitter, and it's just, I have no words. It just breaks my soul into pieces, and I know that I'm not the only one. For example, we had a woman in New York who was murdered in her own apartment. Asian American women who are scared to take the subway because, many of us get killed. And we're frankly fortunate to have a president who would never even dream of using words like, I don't even want to say it, but those racial slurs that Trump used about the pandemic. So I think one reason why Asian Americans are increasingly active in the political sphere is that it's because of the increasing incidence of hate crimes. Old people getting killed in San Francisco just because they went to the grocery market or they walked on the street. And people are realizing the thing that can change the status quo is to get involved, to vote. And politicians won't take you seriously if you don't vote, if you don't donate, if you don't organize. We have to be involved in the system. And I think people are becoming more familiar with the incentive structure, that if you're not voting, you don't have a voice at the table. And I'm kind of the belief that if people don't offer you a seat at the table, you kind of have to grab your own voting chair and, bring it to the table yourself. And that's my attitude. And, no one ever hands us anything, and we have to build it. And that's what we're building right now.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.